Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Geopolitical Pickle interviews. Following our update on the war in Ukraine, we wanted to dive further in how did Western countries start their support to Kiev, and for that, we talked with Tomáš Kopečný, Deputy Minister for Industrial Cooperation in the Defense Ministry of the Czech Republic. We asked him about the Western support to Kiev, how did it start and developed, as well as the lessons that this war is teaching with regards to defense production, the impact and scope of the use of drones, and the geopolitical consequences that the war may bring to other parts of the world. As always, to maybe give you ideas of career development, we also asked him about his path and what did he do to end up holding such position in the Czech government.
So, good evening and welcome to the Geopolitical Pickle. Tonight with us we have the Deputy Minister of Defense for the Czech Republic, Tomáš Kopečný. So first of all, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, I just wanted to go into your background. Obviously, as a Deputy Minister of Defense, what does that involve? Like, what do you do there at the ministry?
Well, I have a specific responsibility. So I'm a Deputy Minister for Industrial Cooperation. It means that I take care of all the support our defense industry gets abroad on their export activities. At the same time, I take care of wargaming exercises that do involve strategic industries, not only the defense ones, but primarily the defense companies. I take care of all the military research and development, all the military technologies development. And last but not least, I also do some analytical part on, when I say I mean my team, but I oversee the work of all these many people that do it. And what I do is that in my portfolio is the so-called localization. So when we, as the Czech Ministry of Defense, buy something from abroad, like new infantry fighting vehicles, so I make sure that there is as much of local Czech content as possible through actually making the company involve Czech industries in either the production line or of the concrete project or in the, say, global supply chains.
So like logistics also and stuff like this would be?
Yeah, and joint R&D projects. And also I do have like most of the bulk of my work and most of my time I used to spend say abroad or working on foreign markets, because more than 90% of the Czech defense industry actually goes for export. So this is the most important part, which makes the Czech defense industry thrive. And lately, for the past 8 months, I've been supplying Ukraine with weapons.
Precisely, we want to touch a little bit upon that. What has been your role with the Czech Republic within NATO countries? Have you had to, has the Czech Republic, obviously a little bit because of your role personalizing you, but has the Czech Republic has some sort of talkings with NATO countries trying to increase the supply going to Ukraine, or how, or the deliveries, for example, has it been, what has been more or less the role in that sense?
Well, we had been the ones who kept pushing all our allied and partners to do more from the very beginning, because we were one of the first countries to start delivering right after the outbreak of the war. All kinds of material, all types of heavy weapons. So in many of the very often discussed types of weapon systems, the Czech Republic was the first to deliver the concrete types of weapons that we do not specify publicly, but we just shipped them there already within the first few days. Not from the stocks of the Czech army, but mostly on a, say, commercial, contractual basis, because me and my team, we were preparing our Czech defense industry for the outbreak of the war for some time. So we were putting together all the data about what we do have, what we could start producing. And when the Russians really attacked Ukraine, we plugged it in, and it was super chaotic and super dark. and difficult from the standpoint of the organization, as also say the psychology. But we created a system that started working on the third day, and we started throwing in the material in Ukraine on the fifth day, right after the beginning of the war. I also started a crowdfunding campaign for this purpose, because usually governmental bureaucracies are slower. So we started fundraising money for the account of the Ukrainian embassy in Prague, which then we worked with as a fund basis for us, respectively the Ukrainians, and us contracting those weapons that the Ukrainians needed the most, and we shipped it to there immediately. So really in the first days it was the Czech people and also some other nationalities, or some other members of other nationalities, that financed the first deliveries of these heavy weapons to Ukraine.
And how has this changed as the conflict has processed? Now we are 8 months in the conflict. Is it better, the communication that you may have with other partners in the logistic part? Has it evolved positively, or is still a bit of a mess?
It is evolving all the time. Now the hard part was really creating the system that worked, and it took us a few days. And ever since, we're just rolling in and doing more and more every week. What changed dramatically was the approach or attitude of also the other countries, especially the Western powers. The key moment was when the US government and Congress decided to start seriously helping Ukraine with deliveries of military material, because that, of course, changed drastically the total volume. What we were delivering was fast, needed, but in terms of the total volume, we are now at like 1.9 billion euros worth of deliveries, and it's very important. And it's, by the way, double of what the Czech defense industry ever exported in a single given year. But compared to what the American government can do and what they did, we're in the same league, like basically.
As percentage of GDP, or?
Well, I guess we're higher in percentage of GDP, but we're in the same league like all the other major donors or providers of weapons, because it's not always donations, like Poland or the UK. The UK is bigger a bit, but it's the same league, the same order of magnitude. The Americans are one order above us. So what changed, crucially, was that the Americans and also the Brits started moving the material in Ukraine on mass scale. And then also followed by other countries. Even France, after its hesitation, started delivering. Italy now, just like today or yesterday, announced new like substantial package. Even Germany started to move on this front. They didn't throw all in. Especially the problem is that they didn't throw in all the potential, not all the material from its stocks. We didn't throw in a lot from our stock either. What we did was that we started mobilizing our industry and just dedicating it solely on Ukraine. If France and Germany did that, it will also make a huge, substantial change.
Do you see like the current counteroffensive that Ukraine's managed to succeed with, I guess, in the east and the south? Do you see that as being a good rallying point to use as a demonstration to other countries about really what the power of the Western arms are able to achieve there with a much smaller population, obviously?
Absolutely. I believe it mentally convinced many in the, say, broader security circles in these countries that it's not it's not a waste of energy and money, that Ukraine has a chance to use it effectively, because to the surprise of basically all of us, the Czechs, the Americans, the Brits, the French, what they do with the weapons and weapon systems they get is just incredible. Like within say, the scope of a single set of the systems, but also in combination. It's incredible. It's completely rewriting all the manuals and doctrines that we were learning for the past 30 years.
Precisely regarding with the doctrines, now we're seeing with the war. I mean, they've been there for a while already. There are drones and the use of unmanned vehicles, also surface vehicles, as we saw recently. Are these drones entering in the industry and shaping it? Also, are they changing how the industry is focused, or are they just going to be a part? Are they just going to be a complement, or is it the industry properly focusing in it? Because we're seeing the cheaper Iranian drones, we're seeing that they are targeting civilian and energy infrastructure. Effectively, because it's not that easy to properly defend against them. Again, with the surface ones that they surface at sea, the Ukrainian ones have used and released some footage. Do you think that is going to change the industry in itself, and it's going to turn into something more where the foot troops or like the individuals are not going to be that much important, and it's going to go into these unmanned vehicles and systems?
It will definitely be complementary to the main war efforts that we are seeing daily on the front lines, which involves on mass scale infantry. And you can see at the front lines when the operations are successful that there was a breach of the mechanized divisions on the, say, defender side. So infantry will be crucial, artillery will keep being the most crucial, heavy mechanized units will be crucial. But also, the biggest difference in the operations between what the Ukrainians are successful at and what the Russians are not is the combination of the different types of forces. You can see air forces that are completely useless when they do not have complete air superiority on behalf of Russia. You can see an industry of Russia that is useless for the war effort with all its supersonic jets, just because there is no real integration or no real capability in the integration of these forces with the EDW, the electronic warfare units, that it doesn't really work even on the level of a command and control, which is incredible, and that they do not provide any useful support for the ground forces. So it's quite surprising to see such a failure on a mass scale. What the Ukrainians are, also to the surprise of many, greatly capable of is not only the integration of different technologies or weapon systems from different countries, but also from the tactical standpoint, the usage of drones in combination with other types of vehicles, systems, or to put it more generally, military tactics. So what we see as a success on the Russian side is the use of the loitering ammunition or suicide drones of Iranian provenance. But they operate separately from everything else.
They're independent.
So it's not like a
coordinated
as you were
strategy.
saying, a coordinated strategy. It's more like you fly the drones instead of like having a proper.
Yeah, it's another part of the artillery capabilities of the Russian military now. So of course you have short-range artillery, howitzers, then you have long-range artillery, missiles. Now these suicide drones or loitering ammunition, they do qualify in the longer or long-range artillery. So they are basically an artillery instrument. They do not provide so far any greater advantage than this. It is very useful for killing civilians, targeting playgrounds, which is what Russians are using them for, and also for targeting critical infrastructure. The Russians are not dumb. They are just using tactics that were deemed to be inconceivable with the modern world order in terms of international law, ethics, basic standards of conducting war, basically using its most expensive and most useful and successful weapons only for civilian targets, is something that is again a little surprising and also a show of desperation that they are not able to use it successfully on military targets. It's happening, it has some effect, though not the one that would change the battlefield. It's, as we can see in the past few weeks, it's actually, from a very cynical and sadistical point of view, boosting the morale of the Russian population, which is enthusiastic about civilian targets in Kiev being destroyed and hit. So it serves a purpose, not a military one, but say justification of all the losses, all the thousands and thousands of new dead soldiers, and seriously wounded people, even more, that didn't think that they would have nothing to do with the military just a few weeks ago. So to sum it up, UAVs are changing the battlefield. Each of the sides is using them very differently, and the industry is adapting to it. What we are observing, though, is not only that the industry is adapting to it, also the whole research environment is now focusing on what it can do to use the existing UAV infrastructure or UAV research for military purposes, especially in Ukraine. All the universities that were previously studying something else related to technologies or technical stuff are now focusing on how it can be used by the Ukrainian armed forces. I have an example also from the Czech Republic. We had Czech University of Life Sciences, and they developed stuff for agriculture. So they had developed this quadrocopter for seeds, for seeding a field. Now they just modified it based on our discussions and also our lessons learned we got from our Ukrainian friends. So they modified it, and they are now certifying a quadrocopter not for carrying seeds but mortar grenades.
Precisely with that, because one of the characteristics of these kamikaze Iranian drones is how cheap they are. Is there any country, is there any industry right now that is able to provide, or that is providing something that would be on that level of in the end, what you were mentioning also before, these long-range missiles, for example, yes, they're highly technological and everything, but they are really expensive. And lowering the costs of the production of these drones could be a way of providing more. Is this being worked on, or is it not something that Western countries are right now working with?
In general, Western countries had not been producing long-range artillery for decades. Like, they have just not been focusing on it, with the exception of the maintenance of these capabilities from the United States. We do not have any other Western country that would think of it even like a few years ago, even a few months ago. Of course, we still do have some capability. I mean, as a NATO, also on European soil, there are a few rockets in France, in Britain. But let's look at Libya in 2011, for instance. So Sarkozy called Obama to tell him, our fighter jets are in the air. Will you support us? We're doing it anyway. Tough call. Support was granted. In 3 days, there was no ammunition left on the European side. The Brits, the French. I'm not even talking about Germans, of course.
Germans actually have had that problem now, that they were running out of ammunition.
Yeah. Now, there is just not a European capability there was not, and there is not even now, to have strong enough or big enough arsenal for this. And also the production sites have been, say, under underdeveloped and under-researched, and simply there was a lack of interest in this. Also in the military thinking, in the conceptual thinking. So what still can be done is to create new production lines for this. Loitering ammunition is not a new phenomenon. It's something that is already in the conceptions in NATO and even in the Czech Republic and many other countries as well. The key thing is the scale of the production. On the Russian side, the very reason why they are using Iranian drones is that they do not have strong production capability. Their strongest advantage is that they have been storing for decades and preparing for at least last decade huge amounts of ammunition, huge amounts of weapon systems, artillery, tanks, large caliber ammo, and missile systems. But their regeneration capacity is almost non-existent, meaning they are not able to produce. I don't want to compare it like on a too concrete terms, but they are not able to produce what they use per day in several months or even a year. So, depending on the technology or depending on the weapon system. So this is something that plays in hand of the attrition warfare, which is the stage that we are at now, for Ukrainians. And the adaptation of the industries is something that we will of course see. In general, the European defense industrial capabilities are limited in especially the loitering ammunition area. That's true. But what I'm seeing, especially in the Czech Republic, in the other areas with which we have been supplying Ukraine since the beginning of the war, what happened was that all the production just started to increase, and therefore, new production lines are being built, new investments are being done, so that not only we know that there will be business for the next 3-5 years, we already now are increasing the production capacity.
So you can see the same thing happening then for UAVs throughout Czech Republic and then more widely through the EU. I think through NATO countries. I mean, what's America's capability for this already? I know they recently assassinated Ayman al-Zawahiri, leader of Al-Qaeda, in using a precision drone, I think. Basically, they could hit him on his balcony. So obviously they have some sort of high technology kamikaze drones, I think. But do you think it's definitely a growth area for the future within NATO countries?
Absolutely. As well as all the other weapon systems and technologies that are successful in Ukraine. Everybody's looking at them now. Like every single military academy, every single university of defense, and every single, designer or developer in weapon companies or defense companies is now looking at what is useful and what is not, what works and what doesn't. And investments in these areas will follow and do already happen. The United States is, of course, capable of supplying, but it's also a question of scale of the production. Just to give an example with the javelins, So javelins, you have a Saint Javelin e-shop and the whole organization, and because they were so crucial. But then even President Biden visited the company. What did he saw? Great production line. But how many pieces do they produce a year? 1,200. I mean, it's been used and shot within the first few weeks. So, again, it needs to be increased and increased and increased.
And in that matter, because you've traveled, talked with countries that are obviously not just within the Western sphere, how do you see all these developments are going to affect the industries and the perceptions of countries in Middle East, in Africa? Russian technology and arm systems, they were really famous in many conflicts all around the world, and also the support or non-condemnation of these countries to Russia was also partly due to these agreements that it's got. How do you see that's going to affect Africa, Middle East, or countries in Asia that they may have these ties previously industrial and that develop into diplomatic ones?
You know, the biggest spender by far in defense is the United States of America. I don't know, 900 million, depending on the year. Sorry, 900 billion dollars,
yes,
depending on the year. China is about 250, more or less. Then nothing. And then Russia is like, some year they claim 55, some year they claim 62 billion. Like, their defense spending for the whole decade that they were even preparing for this war is less than what the US spends in one single year. At the same time, though, for the past 3 decades even, and of course during Soviet times it was stronger, but it was a different economy and so on. But for the past 3 decades, Russia and Russian defense industry has always been the second biggest exporter of weapons in the world. So the US had like, I don't know, 35-40% of the world market. Russia had like 20-25. Huge numbers. And then small Germany, you know, I don't know, 3-4%. This geopolitical strategic reality in terms of dependence on powers will end. And I'm certain of it.
So it will go more to like smaller productions, so to say.
Or diversified.
It can, of course, lead to huge regional geopolitical shake-ups. Because if country A is relying on Russian weapons to arrive next year, and they will not arrive, and country B is relying on another supplier, and they are in strategic competition, it can be an incentive for country B to take some actions, because the deterrence will be off the balance. And this can be happening all over the world. Already now we are seeing growing tensions, and that already means something when we see growing tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Like, countries are getting so much closer to go into an active conflict because of many reasons. Because they can see that the big powers are preoccupied with Ukraine. At the same time, there will be this technical material reality. We have seen that, you know, the Indian army shipped its Russian tanks it bought from Russia, for maintenance and overhauls. The next week, they appeared in Ukraine because Russia just doesn't have where to get them from. So this is a serious problem for everything that will be sold in the future, but also for all the things that had been sold for the past decades, for the maintenance, repairs, overhauls. Every country who is serious about the defense and is relying on Russia is now thinking, how do I get out of it?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking in a couple of examples right now also. Raising tensions between Morocco and Algeria, for example. Russia is the major supplier for Algeria, and the United States is the major supplier for Morocco.
And I think, like, more generally, as a fallout to this, could cripple Russia's defense industry going forward and their arms industry, because they've been proven to be quite ineffective on the battlefield when compared to the competition's weapons.
It's true that they do fail in their ambitions and goals. I'm not certain it's the fault of the actual weapon systems and the military material. When the Kharkiv region was liberated, on the run out of there, the Russians left a huge amount of technique of military material, of tanks, of IFVs. It serves well in the Ukrainian hands. I mean, it's not a problem of the tank. It's really a problem on the
training,
on the strategic command and operational command level, on how to use the technique. So it's not that people would think, oh, so it doesn't work that well. Secondarily, yes, because the insides is not that effective. But the biggest problem is that Russia will just not be capable of producing that amount of military technology anymore. And this will affect the world. We will see the statistics, but it's just unimaginable that with it, the contracts are for long term. So we will not see that, they will go from 25% to 10% next year. But in 2-3 years, of course, if they will not be fulfilling the contracts, it can happen sooner. But in 2-3 years, it will just drastically change balances of power everywhere that Russia has been supplying.
No, just on current technologies, I've seen some anti-drone technologies getting a lot of publicity now. I think the US Vampire systems, I think that must be another growth area for sure. Because at the moment, I don't know what is the defense strategy. Can you use traditional anti-aircraft batteries to shoot down these drones, or is it a separate system altogether?
Yes. You can even use, if I put it in absurdum, you can use a normal rifle if it's connected somehow through a smart way to the system of of course, command and control systems, so that it works throughout, but from the fire control system. Because if it's well integrated, it's not, the anti-aircraft systems are not primarily run and operated on, say, a human instinct level. They are operated based on data that are integrated somewhere, evaluated, and then a decision is done on a machine level. All this process is on an AI level.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether it's a laser beam or, say, 60-year-old anti-aircraft weapon of a certain caliber, 12.7 even, whatever, or if it's a missile, it all depends on the same thing. On the evaluation of the trajectory of the projectile and its prediction of the future path of the projectile and the ejection of your own counter projectile.
Yes,
so
it's all on the...
Yeah. So it's really, and this is the important thing and the most valuable thing about the new developments. It's about the understanding and speed of the AI in these systems.
Will there be, because you were mentioning the incapacity of Russia to replenish its store. Right now we're facing winter. Probably the conflict will be, at least in the battlefield in itself, will get stagnated a little bit. Is there, would Russia have a capacity to replenish its troops during the winter in a way that they could actually then in spring go on the counteroffensive, or is it something that it's not really possible?
It is possible, it is probable. The question that matters is, how will these troops be equipped and integrated in the operational command? They can throw in waves of human bodies, and somewhere they are doing it. It will change little, the conditions on the battlefield. The success of this mobilization really depends on how the Russians will be able to make these newly mobilized men into soldiers, and these soldiers into military units, and these military units into a functioning army.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have loved to touch on North Korea and Chinese arms industries, but I think we're running short of time tonight. But
yeah, we can follow up.
Exactly, I think that's definitely a topic for we can talk.
Sorry, North Korean defense industries. Yeah,
selling to Russia. That is something.
Oh yeah, well, this is something that could happen, but.
And I mean, they're also escalating tensions right now with South Korea for sure.
They just fired several dozens of
just today. I think there's three missiles. One of them landed in South Korean territorial waters for the first time.
Mhm.
So that's a whole other.
I don't think that they will want to give away what they have been preparing for such a long time when they feel, as well as the Iranians against the Saudis,
Exactly.
that somebody is not watching.
So it's,
You know?
it's a more confident time maybe for this people to start a conflict.
Precisely.
So that's why I think that's another interesting topic for the future for sure. And we'll have to get you back on maybe early next year or something. But
For season 2.
for
Season 2.
Exactly.
Great. We can talk about the structure of the Korean defense industry.
Exactly. But the last question, which we always like to ask people, is about your career path. How did you end up working for the Ministry of Defense? What were your interests and fields of study? And what was sort of the path which led you to where you are now? And any potential ideas for the future?
I've been working and stuck at the Ministry of Defense for almost a decade now, which sounds crazy to me when I say it. I was studying at Charles University. I was studying philosophy, like pure philosophy, and also international relations on 2 universities, on 2 faculties of Charles University, 2 programs. And then I guess it really started with the student exchange. I went to Canada, to Montreal, to McGill University. McGill is an amazing university. And I started doing an internship that actually lasted 2 years for Romeo Dallaire, who is a Canadian general who was a hero for saving tens of thousands of people in Rwanda by not following orders from the UN, despite being the UN peacekeeping troops commander. And basically what happened was that I started to be very, very interested in Africa. I was working for 2 years on media monitoring in Nigerian media so that we could catch some potential for the development of a serious crisis or genocide, because it was called the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. So every week I was sitting over Nigerian media and following whatever was happening, if there was some tensions rising or potential for something bigger. Then I started also to be more and more interested in diplomacy and international relations sort of lead to that. What happened was that I was still studying my philosophy and my IR and bachelor's, and I just applied to NATO, international stuff, and they chose me. And I thought, wow, that's cool, NATO. I was like 22. And I thought, I still have some time in between, and I basically fulfilled all my credits back then, so I didn't have to go to school anymore so much. So I just applied. I literally wrote to like 3 ministries saying, I'm actually interested in Africa, I'm doing Africa. And it's only for several months because I'm going to NATO. And I got a reply from the Ministry of Defense that like Mali was happening at the time and nobody knew where Africa was, sort of.
Has that changed? Has that changed in the
most people thought that Africa was a country, So I explained that there are more countries in Africa than it. And they said, "Wow, that's you must be an expert." So
please come in. Please come in. You know that there's several languages.
But there was just another person who was also working on Africa. She was a desk officer, a great clever girl, but also she was basically her responsibility were Latin America, Africa, and half of Asia. So obviously there was no room for more detailed focus. And so I was an advisor for Africa for some time. Then I went to NATO, and it also, of course, changed me somewhat from the strategic standpoint, because I started to understand these processes, like what is important for the alliance, how this works, the processes in terms of decision making. And I was still studying during this time. And then I came back, and the people at the Ministry of Defense already sort of knew about me, and they asked me to come back. So that's why I didn't go for a contract in NATO, plus family reasons. And then I said, okay, I can still work on Africa. I liked it. And they said, yeah, but the world is bigger than that. Why don't you take care of the whole world? And I was like, yeah, it's too big, but okay. And basically, it was the time when there was a brand new division being created. Revolutionary, that there will be a defense industrial cooperation division at the Ministry of Defense. And at the time, like, speaking to defense industries was something very shady and almost forbidden. And now there would be an element in the ministry that would speak to them officially. That was very mysterious for many people. And so I was building, I was not the leader at the time. I was a desk officer. Then I was promoted, head of unit, promoted director of department, and then promoted to the deputy minister. But I was building the system from the very beginning for the defense industrial cooperation. And that's where I ended up with. And for the past 6 years, I was teaching this class because it was so fascinating to me. I was going all around the world, and I was seeing the stuff that I was only being taught in the university from the very theoretical standpoint, usually from people who had never no experiences from the business world. And I don't mean the teachers, I mean the writers who just write about these things from some sort of an ivory tower.
Yes.
And now I saw how things are being moved on the highest level. That, when there was a mission to Africa, America, Asia, Europe, and there was a defense industry interest, we were seeing the presidents, the prime ministers, the ministers all the time, because that's what they care about. If there was a mission with agricultural products, they had to join us so that they would get in the room, of course. Literally. Yeah. Especially in countries where agriculture is basically owned and controlled by the military. So it was super interesting to see how creative and formative is defense industry in terms of geopolitics. So I started teaching this class on geopolitics of defense industry, or geopolitics of defense industry and arms trade. And it's fun. I learn every day something new from students.
So wait, because you didn't finish saying the last time you said I kept on studying. Did you finish it? Did you finish it in the end?
Yeah.
Not your PhD.
No, I didn't finish my PhD. Not yet. I have it paused for like 8 years now. I had my small Czech doctorate, which is like an anomaly. But I finished my master's studies basically right after I came back from NATO. So I was 24. And since I was working on full time. Which I did even before, but now and for the future, I plan to do again something bigger. Like, I got familiar with the whole world of defense industries of every single big American, European, even other countries' companies, now I would like to, in the upcoming months, I would definitely like to focus more on helping Ukraine. I will follow up on the military help, but also I will like to broaden it a bit. And then I'm super interested in emerging technologies, in the investments into biotechnologies and space and all this stuff, and connect it with some good cause, like protection of wildlife in Africa or rainforests, and because that's where I see the future. That's where I see the merger between the latest technologies that are needed and used by the military as well, and something that could revolutionize not only the battlefield, but especially the protection of what we could lose.
I think that's an awesome ending for the interview. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tomáš Kopečný, for being in the Geopolitical Pickle. And for all of you listening, thank you very much for staying with us. And we'll come next week with more interviews, with more debates. Welcome to the Geopolitical Pickle.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks for tuning in to Geopolitical Pickle.
We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
In the meantime, follow us on Instagram for more behind-the-scenes content.
And subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast.
Thank you, and see you next week.